Welcome to the Minnesota Rovers Tuesday evening presentation. Minnesota Rovers is an outdoors club based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our members organize trips that range from 1 hour to 2 weeks in Minnesota or further afield. Examples of our activities include hiking, biking, backpacking, skiing, snowshoeing, paddling, and rock climbing. We also organize conservation and trail clearing trips. Our members have experience and skills in many outdoor activities, so if you want to learn a new outdoor activity, we can probably help you. For more information, go to mnrovers.org. Now let's move on to this week's presentation.
Tonight, we have Britt Forsberg. She's an extension educator with the Minnesota Master Naturalist Program. And has degrees in biology and environmental studies and an MAd in family education. Within that naturalist program, she develops and leads advanced training opportunities that help people to lead to volunteer service. Tonight, she's going to be talking to us a lot about participatory science, citizen science, and roles that you can have in helping with that science. And she's going to also talk a lot about the iNaturalist app. So this will be a pretty good opportunity for people to see how they can actually contribute to some of the data that help make decisions about the environment and things like that. So take it away, Britt.
All right, great. Thank you for that. I will pull up my slides. We just have to shift and my pet peeve with the Zoom, it always makes my chat disappear whenever I go full screen. Okay. So, yeah, that was a lovely introduction. And yeah, well, let's get started. So I'll just say a moment about participatory science. It is a mouthful. Participatory does not exactly roll off the tongue. It's a growing field. It is and was sort of considered citizen science, and people are recognizing some of the feelings that come with the word citizen, and that it might not be it is not entirely inclusive of everybody. And so the field is settling a little bit on, is it community science, is it participatory, is it just we're doing science together? But we at Extension have taken on participatory as it's an active role that people are engaging in. And so but basically it's when science is done with the help of people from the public, not just by trained or credentialed researchers. But for tonight, I have an outline here. We can be pretty informal. We're not a huge group. I am happy for interruptions. Before I worked in Extension, I was an elementary science teacher. And so I can go off on any number of tangents and still come back. You won't hurt my feelings. You won't distract me. I won't lose it. I might not have the slide, but I'll do my best to answer your question. But so I'll tell you a little bit about myself, where we're going with iNaturalist. Because it is primarily photo-based, we'll talk a little bit about how you can be taking photos when you're out and about that are the best they can be, not for artistic qualities, but for identification, right? How you're really contributing to science and helping people learn more about all of these cool places you visit. And then specifically, the City Nature Challenge is an event coming up next weekend. And so how anybody can be connected to that. So about myself, this is, I like to call it my selfie with myself, my 15 minutes of fame, and also how I came to iNaturalist. I was a program manager for a citizen science project called the Minnesota Bee Atlas. So for 5 years, we had people engaged across Minnesota who were helping us learn more about native bees. The Bell Museum turned this into one of their interpretive kiosks. So if you go to the Bell, you can, sort of punch my face on the screen and I'll answer some of those pre-programmed questions for you. But one of our main data collection methods was iNaturalist. And so I've gotten to learn the ins and outs of it professionally. It's also something that I use personally. But my day job is, as Fran described, with the Minnesota Master Naturalist Program. I know there are several rovers who are Master Naturalists, but if you're not familiar with the program, it's a volunteer-based program. So anybody to become a member of the program will take a 40-hour course on one of the biomes of Minnesota. This helps you understand the natural and cultural history. And then we connect you to volunteer service opportunities across the state. So is that you can really be involved in making Minnesota's natural resources better. And my main role in that is the education portion. All right, so with that, we'll get into iNaturalist. It has the little I in front of it, like it might just be for Apple users. It is not. It is a free app, free website that's available on any platform. But what it does, what is this in huge global database? So there's information from across the world. This is just a small portion I pulled of one location, but of all living things. So you might be familiar with some of the more personalized apps like Bumblebee Watch, where you just put photos of bumblebees, or eBird, where you report birds. But iNaturalist is for any living thing. They haven't yet gotten to rocks. We've sort of put in some words like, wouldn't it be great? We have some geology buffs, the Master Naturalist staff. But living things are evidence of living things. So your data that you put in there, just a picture, of the bug that you saw on the walk to the bus, the tree that you saw on the side of the trail. This is now accessible for scientists and the public, like across the whole world. Searchable by the taxon you're looking at, by the location, by the date, anything that you can really think of. It's also a tool for identification, and it does this in two ways. One that's newish to the program is there is an automatic algorithm that works there. So as you start to upload a photo, iNaturalist will compare it to all of its other research grade or reliable identifications in the database and give you its best guess. Sometimes that's the exact species. Sometimes it's more general. They can just say it's in this family. But there's also a crowdsourcing aspect. And so it's kind of like Facebook for nature nerds, right? Everyone has a profile, you log in, and you can comment on other observations. So this example here, I saw a spider on my desk in my office on St. Paul campus at the U of M. I'm not a spider person. All I knew is it was a spider. So that is all the farther I took my identification. But other users were able to come along, and someone narrowed it down to the family of spiders, and then someone could further narrow it to the genus. Since I took the screenshot, someone has told me the species of wolf spider that was on my desk on campus. And I will say that some people just add identifications, some people add comments that are really helpful, like, ooh, did you notice the stripes here? Telling you what to look for so that you learn and you yourself are a better identifier. But I have not yet, in the time I've been working with iNaturalist, ever encountered an iNaturalist troll, right? Like, no one has ever commented, oh my God, I can't believe you don't know that. Or they've never said, that's a really stupid ID. You can't possibly do that. Sometimes they point out, there's nothing like that in this state, right? But they're all helpful, constructive things. And I see in the chat, there is a question about it not being limited to Minnesota. It is not, it is worldwide, anywhere in the entire world. I will say there are more users in the United States. It was developed in California out of the California Academy of Sciences, and it's since sort of spun off into its own organization, their own staff. So in my travels, if I put up a picture, in Europe or wherever I am, it's not responded to as quickly. There just aren't as many people there who are paying attention. But I've never, I don't think, knock on wood, never in my travels had something that's just languished, right? Like no one has ever responded to it, noticed it, whatever. But it is quicker in the US. And certain areas are quicker than others too, right? So, there are a lot of plant people out there. If you have mushrooms, sometimes they sort of languish. And not necessarily there aren't people who don't like or know about mushrooms, right? But it's a lot harder to take a picture that tells you everything you need to know to identify it. You might need a spore print or other characteristics. So right. So just because you put something out there and you don't have any affirmations or you don't have anybody contradicting you, might not mean anything. And I see your question about seek in the chat, Craig. I've got a whole slide on it, so if you can just hang on, we will get there. So I'm going to continue selling you on iNaturalist and all the cool things about it. But it is also a community. Again, I said there are no iNaturalist trolls. No one's mean. So a lot of times, if people have a question or if people want to use your observation for a research project, you can have a whole conversation with them. For in this case, I had uploaded a picture of a mulberry. And it turns out there are 2 mulberries in Minnesota, one native, one non-native. The native mulberry, white mulberry, is quite uncommon. And so it's really of note. If it's found, the red mulberry is not native. It does not, I don't think we know it's invasive or anything. But trying to figure out if you see a red mulberry is in a place that it was planted on purpose, has it spread, right? This will help us determine, is it something that has the potential to be invasive? So this community where you get to know users, I've now met Bonnie KD in person. And it's totally weird and fun when you meet like, oh, you're Jennifer F4, but I've seen your pictures of bumblebees for years, right? Turns out these are real people just like you and me, right? I also see your question, Terry, in the chat about mushrooms and it tells you if it's edible or non-edible. So iNaturalist itself does not have information on every single species. What it does is it has swept in Wikipedia. So if you want to know information about a species, well, it's information from Wikipedia as well as all of the data that's in iNaturalist. So if you look at a species in iNaturalist, it'll have whatever outline, whatever information Wikipedia has, which may include if it's edible or not, or might not. And then the iNaturalist data, it'll show you where in the world this has been found. So sometimes it's helpful if you put something up there and you're like, whoa, that has only ever been seen in Australia. Like maybe that's not the thing that I have. Oh, or maybe it is and it's a brand new non-native species that we should know about. You know, there are 2 possibilities there. The iNaturalist data will also show you a graph of the year with how often it's been seen. So like skunk cabbage, we'll see in a little bit in an example, right, will peak earlier in the year because it's an early season plant. And then by the time you get to the end of the calendar year in Minnesota, there aren't many observations. So that can be another clue for you. But again, iNaturalist doesn't make any claims really itself. It relies on the data that people have submitted, as well as Wikipedia, because that is open source, freely available. And so how to use it? It is really simple. You find something interesting, or evidence that something was there. Take a picture. We'll say this is a graphic from iNaturalist, and we can expand, take a picture to be a little broader to include audio sounds. So now they've added the capability to record things like frogs and birds. And then you upload it into the app. So it's pretty simple, but I will walk you through that right now. So I'm just going to switch right now to the other me so I can show you what this looks like on my phone. So what they're pretty similar, both the Apple and Android versions, but what I'll show you is, if it helps, an Android. So I've just gone in to iNaturalist. You can see things that I've uploaded. If any of those numbers you see in pink, that just means someone has left a comment, added identification, and I haven't cleared it for my notifications. It's not anything terribly special. But one thing that ought to add an observation is down here in the lower right, that green plus sign. And then you have a couple options. No media is one, and that is not terribly helpful because there's no proof, right, of what you saw. Everyone has to take your word for it, and so no one else can confirm that, and that won't become a research grade observation. And research grade is important because it's automatically exported to really big databases like the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. So things that are referred to by scientists all the time. You can take photos directly in iNaturalist, or you can sort of choose from things in your camera roll. Same for sound. In this case, since I am at my desk in the basement and I have no spiders available, I am going to choose an image that I've already taken. All right, so I'm going to choose that first picture. I kind of gave it away when I told you guys that we were going to talk about skunk cabbage. But I happened to see it just today at 9 Mile Creek in Bloomington. So here is where the automatic identification feature comes in, and that's what did you see? So if you click on it, an iNaturalist will think it'll compare to all the other things in its database and first give you what it's most sure about, and then a couple of other choices. So for each of these, now species below, skunk cabbage, swamp saxifrage, kitten-tails, I could click on them and that would open up, again, that Wikipedia information that might give me more clues about when it's expected to be blooming or where it would normally be seen. What are some, it's just text about identifying it. And then you notice it has that slash to see nearby. So it also then is, it gets more sure, right? If this other plant, animal, whatever has been close by, well, that seems pretty likely it could be in the location that you're at. In this case, I do know that it's skunk cabbage. So I can just click that little check mark next to it and then it'll populate. Other things that are really helpful about iNaturalist is that it can read the metadata in your picture. And so it's already put the date and the time that I took that picture. It's shared or stored that location. So I don't have to think after the fact, well, where was I? You know, at what point on that trail, whether the bridge or there are bridges crossing the trail 16 times, which one was I at? Right, I have allowed iNaturalist access to GPS on my phone, and so it has all that. Other things to notice on there, location visibility. Yeah, I have open. That means anybody can see where I found that. If you want to change it, you can. And some people do this if they're on private property, right? Like you don't maybe want your personal home address out there. You can obscure coordinates or make them more private. iNaturalist will automatically do that for any species that is rare or threatened. And so I know that the herp people, reptile folks, aren't sure if it's quite enough. You know, they have some concerns about unscrupulous folks looking for locations and then going and finding turtles or threatened animals. I mentioned at the beginning, I worked with Minnesota Bee Alice. A lot of my experiences with bees. We have a federally endangered bee in Minnesota, but I'm not worried. If I saw a bee one time, I probably can't go back and see the same bee, let alone someone else can use my observation to come back and look for that same bee. So it just depends a little bit on what you're looking at. Plants would be much more easy to come back and find the same one. But again, if it's rare or threatened, iNaturalist automatically does that, and so you don't have to worry about too much. And the last, the checkbox for is captive or cultivated. This is important. They just want to know if it's wild or not. So is it a boulevard tree that someone planted there on purpose? You can still add it. It still might be important data. Knowing when it blooms and being able to track that phenology can still be really helpful. But again, we don't normally have things like, well, like red buds grow pretty well in Minnesota, right? But they're not a wild species. Someone had to put them there. If we find that red buds are out in woods where no one has planted them, well, now that's a thing we need to pay attention to, right? Does this have the potential to be a problem, to become invasive, to be really pervasive? Do we need to know about it from a management perspective? But if it's a place where it's planted, having that information helps people know what to do with that data. So after that tirade, I am done with this observation. And so I can press that green check mark at the bottom and Dun, 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 dun. It is up. Another way that I will show you to use iNaturalist that's not contributing to sort of global science data, but is, I think, a super fun way to use it, is exploring. So I'm going to go up to this top left corner in what I have heard called the hamburger, these 3 lines, and choose explore. And this is just a way that you can look at all the data that everybody has put out there. So in my location, which it draws a pretty big square in the Twin Cities metro on, my skunk cabbage observation is that first one. But I like to use it in a couple different ways, particularly this time of year. So I'm gonna look at the little search, the magnifying glass at the top. But before I go to a park, or maybe I'm trying to choose my park, like I want to know, where am I going to see the best wildflowers, right? So maybe it's something like bloodroot, which I thought it was going to be way too early for. I saw it last week, and then we got cold weather and snow. But so I can look up bloodroot. But there we go. Sanguinary canadensis. And then choose. You can tell I've looked at a couple of these places before. Choose where you're at, right? It's pretty much connected to Google, and so you can often put in the name of a park and it'll recognize it. It doesn't know all parks, and so sometimes you have to put the name of the city. But I can look at bloodroot in St. Paul. It'll take it a little while to think, but then you can just see where other people have seen it, right? Is it, you know what, in 2023 there have been no reports yet, but maybe it's a little too early. Or I can look at it and see all the reports are from 3 weeks ago, so maybe I missed it. All right, there we go. Here we go. So now I can see all the places nearby that people have found it. At the very bottom, it has this sort of grid highlighted. Just to the left, there's that crinkly image that's supposed to be a map. But so then I can see everywhere in St. Paul that bloodroot has been recorded. So I could zoom in, I could look at a certain place in a park. You know, like, ooh, I'm really interested in finding this patch. You can use it that way. Or just or look just for the location, maybe not narrow it down to one plant or plants at all. Just, I don't know, is there anything cool to see if I go to Lemonade Hills? You know, what have other people seen there? And so it can help you choose where you want to go. I mean, you can use it however you want, but that's one way that I look at what other people have submitted and use it to shape me. With that, I will get you out of my phone. There we are. And we'll go back to my other presentation. There we are. All right. So a couple of things that you can also glean from iNaturalist. One, it's getting much better at recognizing when something is not a native species. So like this mullein, it has that little pink exclamation mark. And if you click on it on the website, this hasn't yet made it to the app version. It'll just tell you it's introduced and people brought it here. It doesn't necessarily say, is it invasive? Does it hurt humans? Does it hurt the economy? Does it hurt the environment? You know, what's the bad thing about it? It just tells you it's not from here. And then you can decide if that sort of raises any red flags for you or not. I will say there are people from the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Agriculture who are looking at iNaturalist. And so when they see weird things pop up, they might message the person who made that observation. Frequently, they will go to that place and find that plant. Usually they're plants, sometimes insects. And so they'll just check it out. You know, is this a newly arrived invasive species? Is it something we need to worry about or not? I mentioned that it will obscure rare coordinates. So In this example, I have a picture of a rusty patch bumblebee, which is a federally endangered species. So iNaturalist automatically refuses to share those coordinates unless you have certain credentials on the website. But you can see the little map over here, the inset, has a dot in, I don't know, is that Egan-ish maybe? But that's not at all where I was, right? They've drawn a big box around where I was. They've put a dot somewhere random in that box. Again, that's not at all where I was. It's ish the area, but so you can't, no one can follow up then and find that endangered species. I mentioned captive or cultivated when I went through the app, but putting a coneflower in your garden is not the same thing as if you see a coneflower in a native prairie. And so again, it's not that it's bad or that you shouldn't put those things on iNaturalist, but just mark them as captive or cultivated. Because scientists who use this data just need to know as much as they can. Not a big deal, but it just helps understand how these species are moving. And now, Seek for your question, Craig. So Seek is made by the same people who created iNaturalist. It was in response to a lot of teachers who wanted to use iNaturalist. But there is a federal law, the Children Online Privacy and Protection Act, COPA, which means that children under the age of 13 are not supposed to have their own accounts for any website. As a former elementary teacher, I can tell you plenty of kids under 13 do have their own accounts. But there are some concerns about this. So could someone go to a child's account and look at the pictures they uploaded and find them? You know, is this a non-custodial parent situation? Is it, whatever it is, that might not be desirable for a number of reasons. So Seek does not automatically save observations. It doesn't automatically share any of that location information. And because it was originally created for youth, it has much more of a game feel to it. The user interface is different. So there are challenges that you can sort of sign up for. How many different things can I find, you know, get points. The other difference in using it for identification is you can, as is in this picture, hold the phone over something, and then as long as you have your camera open, it will pop up with the recommended name. So it's not relying on a picture. So as you move the camera, it might focus on a different plant, animal. Even the same one, if you get different angles, it might get a better or worse ID because it can see more of the things that it wants to see. It does use only the automatic identification. So again, because it's not saving those pictures, there isn't that whole group of experienced naturalists who are adding identifications to it. But you can connect it to your iNaturalist account. So if you already have iNaturalist, you can sync those two. And it just means when you make an observation in Seek that you have to like check a little box. Okay, I authorize that this can go to iNaturalist. Again, plenty of people like it for ID. It has a slightly more user-friendly interface, but it lacks that connection to the broader scientific world. So it depends on your goal, what you want to use it for, if that is the thing that is a better fit for you or not. So, but regardless of what app you're using, if it's Seek, iNaturalist, you're sending things to eBird, whatever, there are some things you can do to try to get better pictures. Not this whole like, yeah, Bigfoot, he's back there somewhere. So one tip is to add scale. This is just a mushroom on the boulevard as I walked home from the bus stop. But from the picture that I have right here, you've no clue how big it is. I didn't plan to be out. Again, I just happened to be walking near. So then I tossed my keys down. Plenty of people do use rulers. The Minnesota Tracking Club often does, right? Because that's really important when you have animal tracks to know exactly how big they are. But a clue, again, Maybe not for the algorithm, but for the human beings who are looking at your picture. Think about what's in your picture. Can you get closer? Can you crop that picture so it's easier to see? You know, I started with this picture on the left side, and it is, what, 95% plant? So that's what people and the algorithm are going to think when they when they see that picture, right? They're going to say, well, that's butterfly milkweed. But if I actually want people to be looking at that bee, then I need to make sure that they see that bee. You can do some cropping in the iNaturalist app. And so if you don't have to save 2 versions of your picture right in your camera roll, but you can tweak that as you upload. Related to that, show the things that you need to see, right? From here, we can see this is a lovely, probably maple based on those colors, right? Get closer. What would someone want to see if they were going to identify it? They'd want to see the leaf. If you had seeds available, they would want to see them. And on the topic of showing what you need to see, that might be more than one thing, right? So I have an example of a silver maple. In one picture I've shown that these leaves come off opposite of each other. I've got some of the bark in the background. I have a close-up of what just one leaf looks like, right? Sometimes one of those clues isn't enough for identification, but once you get all of them together, it's better. Same with this rusty patch bumblebee here. Now, none of these pictures are very good at all. They're all my pictures. My feelings are not hurt if you judge them. I was on another walk where I thought I was going to, let myself go from technology, left my phone at home, saw my first rusty patch bumblebee in my life, was so excited, had to use my husband's phone I wasn't used to. So these are all kind of terrible photos. But together they show enough information that's entirely identifiable. They show the shape of the bee's face. They show the side. I have a picture that shows the back, and we can see there is actually a rusty patch here. So your pictures don't need to be perfect, but again, do they show the things you need to see? And the more pictures you have, the more likely it is that they tell that full story and make it easy to understand. So with that, how you zoom, and this is going to depend on what you're taking a picture of course, but trying to get your picture in focus. And I mean, this picture on the left, nothing is in focus, right? There's kind of nothing to do about that picture. But this picture on the right, I can tell you kind of what I did wrong in this picture. So most of the time on our phones, things are changing. I think newer phones have a little different photo system and have multiple cameras. But for the most part on your phone, when you think you're zooming, right, you're using your fingers to push in on your phone, right? You're cropping and just expanding one section. So if you go too far, your picture ends up really pixelated like this, right? You can't add any more definition to that picture. It's just a digital zoom. If you're using a DSLR, a point and shoot camera where your lens, moves back and forth, that's an optical zoom, and that's actually changing, where the lens is. So zooming that way, go as far as you can. You'll still likely have a good picture, but just be cautious on your phone. So the answer to that, instead of standing far back and zooming with your fingers on your phone, is get as close as you can without zooming on your screen. Take the picture, and then you can blow that picture up, right? You can zoom into that, and then you'll have better resolution. You'll have the pixels, for the most part, that you want. Some things are still going to be tiny, and some things you can only get so close to before your camera can't focus anymore. But just a hazard of our phone cameras. And the last one, to think about holding your camera on the same plane as the thing you're taking a picture of. So on the left, they're taking a picture of a tree. The tree is up and down. The phone is up and down. Everything is roughly the same distance from the camera on the phone. On the right side, I don't actually know how their image on that phone looks so good, but holding the phone at an angle when the object is up and down means that the top part of that object is much closer to the lens than the bottom part is. So if you don't have enough light, only one portion of that will be in focus. And so the fix to that is just to hold the camera and parallel to the thing that you're taking a picture of. Not tricky, but also we often hold our phones at the angle that it's comfortable for us to hold them or to look at them. And so just thinking what's the goal, right? Keep that in mind. So a quick run through these, and then we'll get to City Nature Challenge, but you're welcome to use the chat. You can unmute. Are these pictures good, bad? What do you think? And if you think they're great, tell a little bit about why. Well,
okay, well, Lori and I are sitting here debating. She thinks the one to the far right is not good, and I thought that was really good because I can see the eyes.
Yeah, so you can think of all three of these together in one observation. You can put multiple pictures up. So I would say, yeah, just like Barb said in the chat, that they're together. These give you a pretty full picture. We can see the coloration in the back. We can see a bit of the face. They've filled the whole frame with the bee, right? So we can see these different pieces. They are mostly in focus. There are a couple bits that aren't. And again, that's where cameras are and bees are small, but pretty good. All right, how about this one? And this one's my picture. My feelings won't be hurt if you want to beg on it.
He's too small.
Yep. Even if you zoom in, it's very hard to see very much about that bee. And the casual observer might not even realize that that picture is supposed to be about the bee.
Yes. It's about the flower. It's probably a good picture.
Right? The flower is in good focus. We can see many parts of it. Yeah. So again, that's where it matters. What do you want your viewer to see? How about this one? Let's say the point of this one is supposed to be the butterfly.
I guess I'd like to see a little bit of the front of the butterfly, but otherwise it's very nice pictures.
Yeah, we've got the top sort of in the bottom of the wings. And these are also my pictures, and my feelings not hurt. These are not things that I would print out and put in my wall, right? I mean, they're not composed terribly artistically. You know, I could argue about the color or the light a little bit, but they show what you need to see to know what kind of butterfly it is, right? So that's a place where don't be too hard on yourself. You don't be a perfectionist that picture doesn't look exactly how you want it to be, because particularly animals are really hard. They move. It's so your picture can still be valuable to science, even if it's not the prettiest thing that you've ever done. So one thing about iNaturalist, you know, we saw that tiny picture of a bee and we thought, well, what the heck? There's no way we could tell what kind of bee it is. Yeah, there's a definite bias on iNaturalist towards bigger things that are easier to identify. So these are the top 10 most reported bees in Minnesota. 9 of them are bumblebees, and the 10th is a honeybee, which like one honeybee hive might have in somewhere at the height of its colony, could have 60,000 bees. So you see honeybees out and about quite frequently. I drew a red square around the rusty patch bumblebee. Now, if the rusty patch bumblebee were indeed one of the top 10 most common bees in Minnesota, it probably wouldn't be on the endangered species list. But bumblebees are noticeable, so that we hear them and we see them. So more people take pictures of them. People are really aware that the rusty patch bumblebee is in decline. And so their brains are turned on, right? They're going out hoping they see it and making sure when they do see it that they report it somewhere. And these are bees that quite often can be identified from just a picture, right? A lot of the smaller bees, you really need to have a specimen, right? You might need to pull out genitalia, you might need to look at the dents and the clypeus, you might need to look at the mandibles. These are just things that are really hard with photographs. So I've just put up these pretty iNaturalist pictures, so it's not blind with white space, but I think for time, we'll just do all questions at the end, but you've been great about throwing things up when you're curious in the chat, So you're welcome to keep doing that. So timely that I was invited to come, I will talk a bit about the City Nature Challenge. So this started in 2016. At the time, it was just a friendly competition between the California Academy of Sciences and the Los Angeles Museum of Natural History. Just on one weekend, which museum could get more people out using iNaturalist, making observations. And now it's totally blown up. So there are 500-ish cities in the world that are participating now. The goal of going out, documenting species, looking at urban biodiversity, and getting people involved in citizen or participatory science. So this year it's held April 28th to May 1st. So if you are anywhere in the 13 county metro area or the Brainerd Lakes area, they have a project as well. Any observations in iNaturalist that you make are automatically included in the total. There's also a global project, and I will, in 1 or 2 slides, share that link with you. But just as an sort of documenting how it's grown, these are iNaturalist observations over the year. Thank you, Stacey. Years from 2016 up until last year, 2022. We can see the first year, there's maybe a little bump. It was just those 2 cities. But as it's grown, there are more iNaturalist observations that weekend than any other time in the year. And also just seeing in general, iNaturalist is growing, City Nature Challenge is growing. And you could also see a little bit of a seasonal trend to it, that it is started in California and so is Northern Hemisphere heavy. And so you can see our seasons reflected there, right? The lower December, January. So again, I mentioned if you are in that 13 county metro area or the Brainerd Lakes area, those observations are automatically counted. For this global project that I'll put in the chat here, again, you can be anywhere in the whole world. That one, you do have to follow the link and join that project. And once you have an iNaturalist account, you've joined, then your observations will be added to that total as well. If you, I saw there are people elsewhere, and there's Oklahoma, what is something else mentioned? Yes, Florida. You could look for cities near you that might be participating. They will be set up just the same way, where as long as you're in the borders that they drew, your observations automatically go there. So there's been some back and forth on a global event. Like, is this the best weekend we could choose? It's a friendly competition, right? There are no prizes, because on April 1st, there were kids that were cross-country skiing down the street by my house, right? We had 10 inches of snow. It didn't get plowed. It was great. And then 10 days later, there was bloodroot blooming in St. Paul. And we thought, oh man, all right, spring is really going quickly. This is going to be great. We'll have so much out there to look at for a City Nature Challenge. Well, now yesterday, it was, I think, 28 degrees overnight. I had to put a blanket over the seedlings on my porch because I was worried about them. So we don't know what's going to happen. The Minnesota springs are getting more and more unpredictable. But whatever we see, right? There's not an observation that is too small. And you can think creatively, too, about what you add. It doesn't have to be the living thing itself. Could be tracks, nests, birds, even if they're at a bird feeder, they're still wild birds. You didn't put them there, right? You can still document them. It could be the bird's not even alive. Still fair game. My best pictures of birds are dead birds because I get them in focus. I can get nice and close to them. It's totally fine. Again, an audio, iNaturalist will accept bird and frog calls. So you don't have to go far. You don't have to go into the wilderness. We have really rich wildlife in Minnesota everywhere, not just in the boundary waters. And just a little bit about how important these observations can be, even if you're not out there on purpose. You're not out there because you're part of a study that you're documenting a certain thing. It could be happening to come upon an endangered species, this rusty patch bumblebee. I described the work on mulberries. This next one over is a non-native Corydalis, noble Corydalis, something that had been growing for years and years in a section of Como Park where I volunteer. We all knew it wasn't native, but no one really seemed worried about it. I put it on iNaturalist, and it turned out to be identified as a species that had never been documented in Minnesota before. The DNR didn't know that it was here. It wasn't in the Bell Museum's herbarium collection. I sent a picture to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. They went out and looked at it and said, sure enough, that is the species a naturalist thinks it is, and this is the first time it's been documented in Minnesota. Again, it's not brand new. It's not like I was the first person to find it. Plenty of other people knew it was here, but we can't track these things. We can't know if they're invasive, if they're causing trouble, if they're not officially noted anywhere. We'll say with the dead bird, people are looking at, are there certain bird species that are more likely to hit windows? You know, does it happen more at certain times of year during migration? Audubon has been doing some work on that, but certainly people are looking at iNaturalist as well. So it seems like, oh, I'm stepping over a dead bird, walking into the cafe, actually could have this greater conservation value. There's a coyote from St. Paul campus, quite a few urban coyotes now in the area. I'll throw one more. This plant here that looks like someone took a hole punch to it is an ash that leafcutter bees cut pieces out of for their nest. So they chew out this perfect circle, they roll it up, carry it in their front legs, and then bring it back to line their nests with. So all of our information about what to grow for pollinators is based on what has pollen and nectar, right? We don't make our plant lists based on they might line their nests with these leaves, because we just don't know. So there's a project on iNaturalist where you can submit your pictures of these hole punched leaves, and then scientists are using it to figure out, do we need to include these in our plant lists? All right, and with that, I can take questions on City Nature Challenge, iNaturalist in general. I know that I am pushing up on my time available, but I'm happy to stick around for whatever is interesting to you guys. Well, I think I will stop.
I've got a question. My name is Chuck. My name is Chuck, and I was wondering, when you were showing the demonstration of iNaturalist or the Android, I pulled out my iPhone. I have iNaturalist on there, and all the buttons on the top and the bottom of the screen were totally different. Had a very different interface. Can you say something about that?
Sure. I have a colleague who is an Apple user, and I will say over time, her Apple version is getting more and more like my Android version. It might depend a little bit on how recently updated your app is. We'll say, like for Andrea's phone, you know, her button to add an observation is like the middle bottom, and mine's the far right bottom. So they're not identical, but they are growing more and more similar. And they have all the same features, but unfortunately, I can only show you the one.
Right. Okay.
I think I had my time to convince you if you're going to be convinced, but I will say I'm not a person who really believes there's an app for that. Like, I am pretty slow to add new apps to my phone. They take up memory. I don't usually have the newest phones that have tons of space, but I always make room for a naturalist. So, you know, outside of my job, I find it interesting enough and fun enough.
I'll make a comment because you were very thorough. You answered the questions that I had to begin with, so I have none left. Except for I believe that I saw that same coyote. I'm in roughly the same area. I see them at night. It looked like the same one.
There are quite a few that move through.
Pointy ears. I think that was the one.
Yeah, when an emergency vehicle goes by and the sirens go, and then you hear the coyotes yipping after it.
Yeah, I really appreciate this because I've heard about it. I know people who mention it when I'm out hiking, but I've never used it myself, and it was really great to get more information. You know, just to kind of really see how big this thing is and how it's getting used. So I feel a lot more appreciative of it now.
Well, good. And I hope it doesn't feel like an all or nothing. I mean, you can be with some, we'll sort of joke that the Master Naturalist team are iNaturalist junkies. You know, we have to go out and every walk now slows us down. But I will say I am not a document everything person. You know, I sort of wait until something feels interesting, like I'm excited that I saw that, or that feels totally new. And then things happen, like today I saw an otter, but I didn't, I was not close enough with my phone. So now I just have to remember that. And people have to believe that I saw it. You know, there's a little like, oh, shoot. But
I'm glad to know because I don't walk with my phone in my face when I'm hiking. I'm busy looking at everything.
Exactly. I can enjoy that moment and that memory, and that's fine too, right? Like not everything has to be documented. It's fine.
Actually, that does bring to mind a question. So, because I'll start out with this on junky stuff that I would just as soon delete, out of the giant mega database. Is that an option?
Yep. I mean, I think your account will still exist, but you can take the app off and clear up that space.
Oh, I don't mean for me. I just mean because I don't want the whole world to have to go through my experimentations on how to use it.
Yep. I mean, if you want to, you can always delete observations. If you like, I practiced with that. I practiced when I was inside and I had a potted plant, and then that was how I walked through the app. But I'm going to delete that because that's not important. Yeah. Cool. That's totally fine and fair.
Say, Britt, there's a chat here wondering if you can share the email address to the City Nature Challenge. Is it an email or do they go to the website?
So the website that you found is the overall for all of the world. I'll put another link in here, sort of our Minnesota version. And so that's distilled a little bit where there are tutorial videos, just how would you make an observation? How would you identify something someone else made? And then some events that we have that they're sort of format. I mean, we're advertising them to our Minnesota Master Naturalist volunteers, but they're open to the public. I mean, we're all going to be in public spaces. You are welcome to show up at any of those.
And you're welcome to come to our rowers meetings at Como starting May 16th.
Yeah, well, Como, a woodland outdoor classroom is where I primarily do my volunteering. So
I caught that, so I figured we might see you around.
Yeah.
So I guess from what Rob said, is there a limited space on the app in terms of your observations and how many you can put up there? Or?
No, I mean, it's cloud-based. So like for me, a lot of the time after I upload a picture to iNaturalist, I delete it from my phone. So then it's not taking up my memory space, but I can always go back to iNaturalist and I can always get that picture again.
Oh, so they have a lot of space. Oh, that's nice.
They will limit the number of pictures you can put with one observation. But someone mentioned a huge server behind it. So we have a master naturalist who is a retired BCA photographer. So she's using her DSLR, right? That has an incredible just size of these files, right? She puts them on iNaturalist and iNaturalist doesn't kick her off and tell her that she's taking up too much space on their server. They're really high quality photos there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Britt, I have a question. When you go to that section of the app that's observations, and I open that up and it looks like there are all these different colors, green, red, pink. Do they mean anything? And then I noticed like there's hardly any observations in my neighborhood, but in like St. Anthony Park, there's lots and lots. So why would that be? Is that just because St. Anthony Park is near the University of Minnesota St. Paul campus, and so you're all walking around using the app?
It probably is.
Okay.
Or, there are teacher education classes that are there and they use it as a tool in practice. But your question about the color of those markers, and they do correspond with the organism. So
Oh.
birds will be a color, plants are a color, mammals are a
Ah.
color.
Okay,
I
And I-
never remember which is which, but
Okay.
there is a code.
got it. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So I am a member of the Florida National Scenic Trail Association. And does that qualify me to qualify my neighborhood to be in this? Or I do know some of the board members of the Florida Trail Association if necessary.
You don't have to have certain credentials to sign up for City Nature Challenge. It is getting pretty close to the start. And so you just go to the website and then the national organizers would have information on, is there still time to do it? But
okay,
even if
awesome.
if you're not in the big umbrella of City Nature Challenge, you can always, within iNaturalist, just set up a project is what it's called. And you would just say, all you would do is define the boundaries. So you could, if it's recognized in Google Maps, you can just do that, or you could just literally draw a polygon over the area that you want. And then
Great.
it'll
Because
grab.
I live on an island that
Oh.
is more than half a, the words just flew out of my head, but Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, more than half of Merritt Island is a national wildlife refuge, and I live on that island.
Oh, very cool. So your borders are very easy.
Yeah, we're kind of separated between two rivers and
Yeah.
and the coast.
Yeah. So you could define that as a project, and then anybody who visits the National Wildlife Refuge and uses iNaturalist, right? Your project would grab their observations. You don't have to know that person. You could just see what they've seen.
Thanks for watching this Minnesota Rovers presentation. If you want to see more, please click on the link to our channel or the subscribe button below. Thank you.